Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into this special episode of an interview with a special friend. He is the author of Teammates on Ice, the first 50 years of NHL Superstars, All-Stars, and role players from 1917 to the NHL's inception up until 1966-67 when the league expanded. This is the book right here. You can get a copy on lots of places, including Amazon. I know we'll get to that later in terms of where you can get the book, Ray, but thank you so much for joining me for this episode today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Andrew, and we'll talk about the book.
We shall do that. We shall do that.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I felt reading this. Now, forgive me. I don't have a mic, by the way. I'm giving Ray the mic because I want you guys to hear him clearly more than anybody. It's my first time doing a two-person interview down here, so I got to get myself a second microphone. I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, in reading this book, what I found was that it really seemed like a missing piece in hockey culture and hockey lore, in that we haven't had a chance to fully acknowledge or recognize some of the unsung heroes. Also, you got a lot of the greats of all time in here, but
Yeah.
maybe just tell the audience, and they are a Montreal Canadiens fan audience, a lot of them. So just we'll get to the Habs in a second, but maybe tell them about the reason why, which you do detail in the intro of the book. Not just why you decided to write it, but why you decided to write this kind of book to pay tribute to the original superstars and all-stars and role players that founded the NHL, right?
That's right. And, I'd just like to say that, these players, they built the NHL to what it is today. And, I think that a lot of the players, they were great players, not just the superstars, but I talk about the all stars, and there were players that played the game back then that were star players. They may not have been all stars, but some of them set records. I wanted to bring their names to the forefront. They've long been forgotten. Yes, people know the superstars, the Howie Morenzes and the Charlie Connickers. But, there are many, many players, as there are today, that, deserve recognition. And that's the reason for the book. I wanted to, basically tell their story, and the profiles in the book do just that. They talk about, the profiles talk about their time in the NHL. And that's what I focused on. There's some cases where, we talk about, maybe just before their NHL career started or just after. I remember writing Val Fontaine's profile, for example. Now, Val Fontaine played for the Detroit Red Wings most of the time. He also played for New York. And I mentioned that, he had an incredibly low penalty record. I illustrate over 800 games that he played, and he had only 26 minutes in penalties, which is pretty remarkable. I went outside the 66-67 season to illustrate that point. That his entire career, which included, the expansion years, they they pretty much gave the person reading the profile a taste of what a player did after the NHL from the 66-67 season. So that was a prime example.
Now there are in total 500. Sorry, I think 628 player profiles.
Yes, there are 628 player profiles, and so there's a certain number that were broken into two parts. Star players who played longer than a decade would be profiled in, for example, Gordie Howe, who's illustrated on the cover. He played in the third and fourth decades, and so he's profiled in the fourth and fifth decades. Of course, Howe played many years beyond that. He actually played, I think it was 5 decades. He retired in 1981, I believe, and so that was the fifth decade. That he played.
He's at the top of the list, actually, on a lot of these records, including games played all time.
Oh, yeah.
1,300.
Yes.
I should mention also we have the Rocket Richard on the back of the cover, guys. So
yes.
I'm just going to show this to our audience
Yeah.
quick here, but you can see, and then Gordie on the front here. There's some players' profiles that I found very interesting, Ray.
Oh, yes.
Very interesting. And this was one of them. Bill Cotu.
Oh, yes.
Was part of the Montreal Canadiens.
Yes.
Now, it says here, and I'm just going to read the last sentence on this profile. While on his way to the dressing room, Cotu assaulted the referee, for which he would receive a lifetime suspension from the NHL. I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Yes,
so
yes.
Can you talk about maybe Bill Cotu a little bit, playing with the Canadiens from 21-22, 24-25. Yeah, I'll let you talk about him for a moment, because I found that very, very interesting.
Well, Bill Cotu was, a rough player, to say the least. There were, the game then was much more physical than it is today. Hockey has always been a physical game. But in the early years, especially the first decade of play, of NHL play, there was many players that were, Bill Cotu type players. You can go on down the Montreal Canadiens roster. For example, Sprague Cleghorn was a very rough player. Newsy Lalone, forward, he was a very rough player. In fact, he not only went after the opponents, but his own teammates.
Right.
If he disagreed, too. And fans as well. Yeah, so it was a different game then than it is today. And I should also point out that for the Montreal Canadiens fans out there, that they won their first Stanley Cup 2 years prior to the formation of the NHL.
Right.
in the 15-16 season. And and of course, many players profiled in the first decade played Stanley Cup hockey, professional hockey, in various leagues prior to the formation of the NHL. So that's important to remember as well.
Now, for the Montreal Canadiens fans that are watching again, because that's the majority of those who tune into this channel and the Drew Dekes channel, are there stories that come to mind personally for you about the Canadiens that maybe you didn't share in the book, or that you did, that you want to share with the viewers?
Well, yes, talking about Newsy Lalone, I got to meet him. This would be the very early 50s. I don't remember. I was probably 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8. Anyway, Newsy Lalone was a great lacrosse player, and he was voted the greatest lacrosse player of the first half of the century. And, he played lacrosse with my grandfather, who's mentioned in the book, in the acknowledgments page. And anyway, my grandfather called me into, the living room of his home, and wanted me to meet Newsy Lalone, who was visiting my grandfather at the time. And, I remember distinctly that both men rolled up their pant legs to show me the scars and bumps, from playing lacrosse and hockey as well. And, but, I remember him saying that, he got most of those bumps and bruises playing lacrosse. So, that was, and also, to meet somebody that was born in the 1800s. Newsy Lalone was born in 1888. There are probably not many people alive today that can say they met somebody that was born in the 1800s. But that was a memory that stuck with me all through the years.
Now, somebody else that really had a big impact on your life, I went to your book signing at Kohl's. That's
yes.
Where I got this.
Yes, that's right.
You signed it for me. Sid Smith.
Yes.
So Sid Smith played a major role, former Toronto Maple Leaf, for those that don't know. Somebody that really gave you a vote of confidence to pursue your passion for the game, which ultimately turned into this book.
Yes, that is correct. Sid Smith was playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs when I first listened to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1951. I was 6 years old at the time, and I just I remember, Maurice Richard, the Rocket, and Sid were trading goals. They both scored 5 goals in the finals, and it just seemed to me like they were, one would score and then the other would score. And and with apologies to those Montreal fans out there, I was Toronto Maple Leaf fan, and so I pledged my allegiance to Sid Smith uh, because he was a Maple Leaf, and uh, I've had many great memories since then, since that Stanley Cup playoff final, which, incidentally, all 5 games went into overtime with Toronto prevailing 4-1.
Now you had the chance to meet him on more than one occasion. Is that right?
Yes, I have. The well, I think the first time might have been at one of his signings, and Bob Goldham, Detroit Red Wings great, was with him, and they were signing autographs, cards and programs, what have you. And, together they thought that I would enjoy the alumni luncheons. And so they invited me, and I've been going to them ever since. It's a gathering of old timers, at the luncheon. And right now it's held at Maple Leaf Gardens, the original Maple Leaf Gardens on Carlton Street, downtown Toronto. And, I've just been going to those luncheons ever since. You know, uh, Sid Smith and Bob Goldham invited me. So I've been attending from that time on.
Well, there's a good story that came out of that also when I met your son, Paul, who I worked with and who helped set up this interview with you and actually introduced me to you.
Yes.
He was starstruck by guys like Ace Bailey, who asked Paul for a seat at the table.
Yes, yes, that's right. Ace Bailey, Toronto Maple Leaf great, was born 1903. So, by 3 years, he missed, having somebody born in the 1800s. But anyway, Ace Bailey was actually Toronto's first scoring champion. And mind you, they haven't had a scoring champion in many years. The last scoring champion they had was Gordy Drillin, and that was in the 37-38 season, I believe. And they have not had one since. Frank Mahovlich came close, but no cigars. He finished third in the league that year.
Now, I want to ask you again about this book because we're in the year 2022, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
The game has changed drastically, of course.
Oh, yes.
We know that. But
yeah.
What do you think you wanted to accomplish? You have statistics in here in this book, or actually, I want to rephrase that question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the importance of a book like this in regards to how to appreciate today's game by first appreciating how we got here?
Yes, well, that's exactly right. How we got here. Looking at the players from the early days, the first 50 years, makes one realize that the game today is so much better. Everything about the game is better today, and it's the early days. We have to really thank the players from the past. Because they're the ones responsible for what the game is today. And I think that, uh, whether they're role players or star players, it didn't matter. It takes uh, all of them to make up a team. You can't just have a team with superstars because, there aren't that many superstars. You can't make a team up with all stars because, there aren't many all stars on a team. And, maybe one or two. Uh, but role players, the journeyman players, they make up the bulk of the team, and they're responsible for making a team, really. And that's why I've included in the book many of the role players, journeyman type players, that didn't have the talent to be all stars or superstars, but they were darn good hockey players. And well, they made the NHL, and that alone is something. Um, you know, uh, I mentioned at the introduction about players, um, that not that made the NHL, but had great careers in the minor pros. Lou Jankowski of Chicago Blackhawks was just, one such individual who I think he played 4 years in the NHL, but had a long career in the minor pros, and a long, successful career, I might add. So, that's my reasoning for including the role players as well as the all stars and superstars.
So now, this project was not overnight, of course.
No.
No book is, but I mean, you say in here that from the time you were about 6 years old, watching that first Stanley Cup final with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, that this book was birthed really right around then.
Well, it was, I think that, it wasn't thought of as a book. My dad got me interested in players from the past because he would tell me about players that he admired growing up. And, I think that really resonated on myself. Uh, I remember him talking about Charlie Conacher and Lionel, his brother Lionel Conacher, who was voted the outstanding athlete of the first half of the century. Um, you know, uh, Speaking of Lionel Conacher, I mean, he played several sports professionally. He was an outstanding pro football player, played baseball, boxing, besides hockey, and, probably a few other sports that I'm not mentioning. And, but, I remember my dad mentioning Jimmy Ward, Montreal Maroons. For those Montreal fans out there, um, the Maroons were, in competition with the Montreal Canadiens. And Montreal had, I think it was 14 years, they had two teams in the city. And my dad being English, he was a Montreal fan, but Maroons fan, not Canadians. And he was also a Toronto Maple Leaf fan as well. because he would often talk about Charlie Conacher and, the big bomber, and he was definitely a superstar, from that era, in the 30s. Um, but, my dad got me started. I became interested in players from the past, because of my dad talking about players that he admired growing up. And, I became fascinated with, I wanted to go back even further, and which I did. And, just soon discovered that the league NHL started in 1718. And, I wanted to learn about all the players. And, I would make notes, and I kept notes. I've got a couple of cousins where I was born in Cornwall, and they used to ride me about, keeping all these statistics and players' names and profiles and what have you. And, because they were both girls and they didn't really care, uh, you know, but, they're still with us today. And, they remember, me compiling information on the players from the past. And, I just kept uh, adding to it, through the decades and right up to the fifth decade. And so there we are.
Certainly paid off.
Yeah,
They're all in here now.
yes, they're all in here in the book. And, unfortunately, you can't put everybody in the book, so, but, I tried to, whether the role player played 2 years or 10 years, I tried to include him because, he played an important role. And that's where the emphasis is. Also, I'm hoping that I can attract family members of those players. Uh, you know, uh, there would be grandchildren, great grandchildren, and in some cases, great great grandchildren that came from players like Bill Coutu and Sprague Cleghorn and Joe Malone. These were great players, but uh, the generations move on, and it would be nice, to attract uh, people, young people that remember. Oh, my dad played for Pittsburgh Pirates, back in the 20s. That would be fascinating.
One thing I forgot too is that Hamilton had a team
Yes.
in the NHL.
Yes. Hamilton. That's interesting. Hamilton was in the NHL for 5 years. And it's ironic that they were called the Hamilton Tigers, by the way. And it's ironic that in their fifth year, they finally had a team that, cohesion set in, and they were on top of the NHL. They were in first place and heading for the playoffs, only to have the first player strike in NHL history. Um, and it was over the amount of games that the NHL was expanding the number of games by 6 or 8 games, and the players, wanted more money for those games. The league would not budge, and so that's the only year that the Hamilton Tigers missed out on the Stanley Cup.
Very interesting. Like,
Yeah.
so many people don't even realize, including myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, Hamilton had a team in the NHL.
Yes.
I did want to ask you another question, but for some reason it might be escaping. Well, I guess I'll ask this first in regards to the Montreal Canadiens once again, because yes, that's our viewers for the most part.
Right.
But what was it about the players? Like, we read about the Richard brothers, Jean Beliveau, even going back to as George Vezina, even, who tragically passed away at a young age.
Yes.
But what was it about those kinds of players on that Montreal team that drew in so much interest from a typical non-hockey fan?
Well, that's a difficult question. They were cut from a different mold. George Vezina, he was a goaltender, and he was a star player. One of the stars on the team. You mentioned the Richard brothers, Jean Beliveau. They were. They were cut from a different cloth. Teams today would kill for a Jean Beliveau or a Boom Boom Geoffrion. It's just, they were incredible players, and there are incredible players today. Today's players have the benefit of, better training, better diet, better everything, really. And, players, from the old days, you had to look twice, is he a hockey player? Gump Worsley was, pot belly and all, he didn't look like a hockey player, but he was a damn good one. But it's you see the game today. So much. So much has changed. Today, players today, they all have 6-packs, and players back then, they drank 6-packs, and that was really the difference. The players then had a genuine talent for playing the game, and little else. The ability to skate well. Players today have everything else over them, except the genuine talent for playing the game and the ability to skate well. That was, players today have that, but that was the only thing players back then had that, you could compare them.
I just want to close with this. I just want to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
for all the hard work and all the years that it took to put into making this book a reality, how gratifying has it been to really see it come to fruition?
Well, it's gratifying. I remember my wife telling me, 20 odd years ago, now is the time, to put all that hard work together. And so, I've been working on it for a little over 20 years, finally putting the information together and forming the book. It's very gratifying. Um, especially, a non-author. My specialty was in drawing. I was a commercial artist, and I specialized in black and white pencil portraits, and that's evidence on the front and back covers. That's right. But
Now you said how gratifying it was, how you had a lot of people in your corner to really push you. That's one question I wanted to ask actually before I let you go is, are there any players that are in this book that you were able to either reach out to or just say, hey, by the way, you're going to be acknowledged in this book?
Well, yes. I remember talking again. This was at the old timers luncheon. I remember talking to Danny Lewicki. He played for Toronto and New York and Chicago. I think briefly at the end of his career, mentioning to him that I was doing this project. Pete Conacher, son of Charlie Conacher. Pete was a good player. He made the NHL. He was 6 years in the NHL, and played for a terribly weak team, Chicago Blackhawks. But he wasn't his dad. Let's put it that way.
But you had the chance, it sounds like, to include the people that you wanted to in this book, and that's the really honorable thing I think you did, by including all these guys that didn't get the recognition that they deserve.
That's correct. That's correct. I wanted to, mention all the players that, the role players, journeyman players that did not, get the recognition, shall we say, that they knowingly deserved.
Well, that might signal the end of our interview because, as I told you, these pictures don't always stay on the wall.
Yeah.
So that's Carey Price. But no, you mentioned it, and there is a boatload for any hockey fan. You are not going to be missing out. It's actually, to me, a must-have for any hockey fan. This book, Teammates on Ice: The First 50 Years of NHL Superstars, All-Stars, and Role Players, by Ray Mulley. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to jump on here and share the experience of putting this great piece of work together. Right.
It was my pleasure, Andrew. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. And we will see you on the next one. This is Andrew, aka Drew Dekes, signing off with Ray Mulley. Thank you.